welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jessica, and I am here with one of our amazing co-hosts.
Hi, my name is Kay. I'm one of the Reader Services librarians here at the Syosset Public Library, and my whole job is to put a book in your hands. And today we have a very wonderful guest that we're both very excited to speak to about his upcoming novel.
Yes.
So if you would like to introduce yourself and then tell us about your book, you may do so right now at this moment.
Yes, hello. I am Stevenson. I am an author, illustrator, cartoonist, animator, tried a lot of different things, all in the pursuit of storytelling. So I'm very, very honored to be on with you today.
Yeah. We are extremely excited to have you on. I would say this is one of our bucket list interviews.
Hey, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah.
We were actually talking before we joined the call today that both of us have been following you on Tumblr for over a decade.
Yes.
Oh my God. Way back in the day.
Way back in the days.
Yeah.
So to say that you've worn a lot of hats, yeah, I think the two of us have kind of witnessed your journey wearing all those hats. And I guess that kind of brings me to like my first question for you. Like, how has that been for you doing all these different jobs? Do you have a favorite?
Well, I don't know about a favorite. I think I'm just like, I'm really interested in like storytelling in general. So like, what is it? Why do we do it? What do we take from it? What are we trying to say when we do it? Because like, I think and I assume you and many of your listeners as well have had that interest from a very young age. And so for me, I think all these different mediums that I've had the privilege of exploring in the last 10 years since Tumblr, it really is, so much of what's driving it is just an interest in how it changes the story to write it in prose versus animating it versus it being a movie or a TV show or a book that you hold in your hands. Like, so I don't think, well, okay, I'm gonna say that like comics is probably always going to be the closest to my heart. That's where I got started. That was like kind of where everything clicked for me, and I hope that I will never stray too far from it. I currently am very, very interested in prose, just because I'm like, what is this? How does it work? I desperately want to take it apart and just see how it ticks. But yeah, I think that comics is always going to be my first love.
I love that for you.
Yeah, me too. But I have to say, this leap to prose is lovely. This book is gorgeous. I would call this an insta buy for my household, and I'll certainly hope
Yes.
that the children's department has it.
Your sons are gonna love this.
My sons are gonna love
Yeah.
this book. But one of the things you had just said sort of ticked off one of the first questions I had for you, which is about the power of story, because this book is so much about the power of story and the power of who gets to tell the story and what way they get to tell the story. So kind of diving off of what you had just said, how did you decide that Scarlet Morning was going to be a prose novel? Although it is illustrated, the illustrations are lovely, but at what point were you like, this is a prose novel?
This book was actually one of the first things that I ever wrote when I was still a teenager. And so it was always kind of like, I had the privilege to be able to, try so many different mediums and be a part of so many cool projects through the years. But this one has always kind of been, because it's the first, it's the first, and it's like these characters have stayed with me a really long time. But I wasn't sure at first if it was going to be a prose novel. I pitched it way back. I started working on a pitch for it to be a graphic novel, and it never quite came together in that way, which is interesting because it's like, like what, I don't know, like how do you experience this world? What's the difference between experiencing it through prose versus through a more visual medium like animation or comics? And just at the end of the day, I was like, I think this is a story that needs to be told through prose, which meant that I had to like relearn how to write prose, which was very scary and very hard because it's in a lot of ways it's a lot more vulnerable than some of the other mediums that I've worked in. It really is, you know, like you said, it's heavily illustrated, so I get to kind of like, you know, bring my comfort zone in that way. But in so many other ways, like it's my words, you know, a little bit in comics, but very much less so in animation. You're not seeing the words themselves. They happen behind the scenes. So having the words forward that way, it's really, I think, kind of a contract with the reader where, you know, the visuals start to take place in their heads instead of on the page. And so that really becomes the challenge when it comes to writing prose. But at the same time, the world felt so big and the characters were there were so many of them and it was so expansive that I was like, I think the only way that I can make this work is through prose. So let's do this. And and here we are.
You did such a great job. I could just visualize every inch of this world from the minute I opened the book. So
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I have a little bit of that in common with you because I also started writing a novel when I was like 15, 16 years old, and then put it down and picked it up and put it down and picked it up, et cetera, ad nauseum. What made you finally decide now's the time? This is when I should really like choose this and write it and make it a reality instead of just something in my head?
Yeah, I mean, I think it had been, you know, gathering like virtual dust. It had been in this zip file, and I hadn't touched it because I didn't want to reread it. I had such fond memories of it from like that version, that first version I wrote, that I didn't want to read it and be like, oh no, it's bad. And it really wasn't. I started this process in 2020, and a few things happened in 2020. I don't know if you heard.
Just a few.
But also a few things happened to me. One of them was that Shira came to an end. The show I was working on, the final season, came out, and after 5 very intense years, that was over. And the other thing was that I, along with everyone else in the world, could not leave my house for much of that year. And it was a really strange place to be in. Shira was one of the most intense jobs that I've ever had. And then suddenly the whole world just slammed the brakes.
Yeah.
And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't have like, not even just, I didn't have a job. I didn't have a story like banging around in my head, which was really, really, it was bad. It felt bad. Because I've had that ever since I can remember, you know? And so it was really just like, not just like, what do I want to do next, but like, who am I? You know, like what could possibly come after this? I felt so empty somehow. Like I'd given everything and there was nothing left. And so the way of kind of starting um to kind of like work on myself, to kind of like start to pull myself back together from this case of burnout and this case of like, you know, this world suddenly being turned upside down, was to go back to something that I had loved a long time ago. And to see if I could sort of like, if this was a world that I still knew and characters that I still loved. And the version that, you know, is coming out is very, very different from that version. I did a lot of work on it. But you know, the question was answered, and I was like, I do still remember this world. Like it feels still very real to me, and these characters feel very real to me. They feel like old friends. And that was sort of my way of like falling back in love with storytelling and figuring out new stuff that I was into. Sort of using old loves as a way to like get me back into that.
Nice. Yeah, you never forget the OCs that like, for
Yeah.
lack of a better term, like grabbed you by the throat and won't let go, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and when you decide, okay, you guys have a loud enough voice, I understand, I'll let it happen. Like, I think that's really where like a lot of the magic can happen for that kind of thing. So I'm glad that you went back to this. That's great.
like I said before, it really is just beautiful. I am curious because it is as rich in world as it is in character. Was there a specific character in Scarlet Morning that came before all the others, like the one that kind of knocked on your head first and was like, "Hey, let's talk about me."
Yeah, definitely. I mean, It's Scarlet Morning herself. It's Captain Cadence Chase. She is, I think, my oldest character. This character kind of came around when I was very young. It predates this specific story even. And there was just kind of like I was a kid who was very, very interested in adults. I sort of thought I didn't think I was a kid. I thought I was an adult, but I was always kind of looking to the adults around me, being like really fascinated. What are they doing? Why? Like everything. And then when I encountered big emotions of my own, one of my ways of dealing with that was always like, I wonder what it would be like to get divorced. You know, like, and so that really is the character that came out of that, where it's just like, who is this? I've sort of been, she draws people up into her orbit, and you never quite know why she's doing the things she does. She is this great mystery. But that was sort of what I found so exciting about this character. I just like wanted to know, I wanted to put myself into the place of Viola and Wilmer, who are these orphans who are find themselves just sucked into the story that she is at the center of. And then I always just like, there's a certain kind of like lady pirate that I have always wanted to see, and I've gotten very little of it. They are out there, but I'm like, as soon as there's a lady pirate and she's wearing like a corset on top of her shirt, I'm just like, I'm out. I'm like, we need a few different types of lady pirates than this. And I always really, really wanted to see that in something.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Oh, for sure.
I want to go back to talking about little you, young you, and I'm just curious, like, what really, I mean, you mentioned like pirates really inspired you as a kid, and like following the adults around and like looking around and being like, adults, man, I get it, I'm here with you. But like, what really did inspire child you, teenage you to start writing like this story specifically?
A lot of it was, there's a certain amount of really, really broad autobiography in a very, in not the way that you might think, where I think that this idea of this land, this magical land that's more ocean than land, and that was really how I viewed the world at that age. And I was always trying to make my pirate treasure map to guide me through it. And it's because I felt like I was like myself and my friends, I was growing up in South Carolina as a homeschooler, entertaining myself a lot of the times and entertaining the other kids. And so this world started to come out of that, of all of these, this world that felt very big and unexplained, and where I felt I didn't have a place in it. And this became my way of finding a place in the world and sort of bringing people along with me. And that really, that the realness, the way that it felt when you're that age and you're kind of like, I think if I just go around that corner, I'll see this ship, I'll see this island, I'll see like it really felt like if I just looked a little harder, then that magic would become real. And so that was really, I think, why this specific story compelled me so much, and why I kept trying to go back to it, was because I felt like maybe this time I could get it right. Maybe this time I could bring that world to life, and I could, maybe sort of show it to more people, or make it real for more people besides myself, because it was this sort of thing that I was seeing, and it was just this tiny little it's difficult to explain, I guess. It's like when you're that age and you're just like,
That's
I don't
okay.
know if you ever had a similar experience of your own, and it just like it sinks its teeth into you.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of kids feel that way, when they're,
Yeah.
especially when you reach your teenagehood and you're like, what am I doing? Like, is this the world? And like you're finding your place in it. I find that metaphor of like your world as a map and you're plotting your way to the treasure. I like that. I think that's
Yeah.
really fair. I think a lot of people go through that. And I think the people who don't explore that kind of like mentality, or people who don't get to look at the world like that, are kind of privileged, I think, to
Yeah,
not
for sure.
have to worry about like their place,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and I mean, yeah, a lot of us go through that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I also thought it was interesting, and you talk about how Wilmer and Viola are orphans. That is sort of, I mean, if we can call it a trope, that is a trope that I think is always dear to a child's heart, even if you have like a really supportive family, because you're kind of an island in yourself at a certain
Yeah,
point
absolutely.
where you know, you are trying to figure out what your place is. And when you're dropped into a story where the characters don't necessarily have a past, they just are trying to figure out where they fit in, where their place
Where do
is,
they
and
go
what
from there?
where
Yeah.
they go from there. I feel like it's really relatable no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this is I think a very universal experience for children in a lot of ways, where you're sort of brought along to something that you don't really understand. And so like one of the big places where this world kind of was being developed as a kid was that because I was homeschooled and we were religious homeschoolers, and so like we met for a lot of classes. We used to meet in mega churches on like in the middle of the week. So it'd be these huge empty, like they're massive, massive buildings. They take up whole blocks, like they're huge. And I would be running through these endless hallways with my friends and hiding and spying on the older kids and spying on the adults. And it was this like, you know, it brought that feeling of that world, a world that's like a liminal space, I guess. Like that's the feeling of kind of like, it's not very well charted. You're not really sure what's out there. And even things are moving around. Like this is a world where things kind of move. And so much of like developing this world was trying to capture the feeling of that, of just like the kind of exploration that you do as a kid, where you're like searching for that magic in a place that you don't really understand.
I did have another question about the story from when you wrote it. I know I keep going back to that, but our colleague Jen couldn't come today to the call. She told me to ask you a question. So this is Jen's question. She wanted to know how much the story or characters have changed since you started writing this in your youth. And I know you kind of touched on it a little bit. You said earlier that the story that we're now getting is a lot different than the story where it started, but she specifically wanted me to ask you that, so I am.
I think when it comes to you know, the actual prose and the actual like much of the dialogue, it is almost all new, but I do think that it is still following. It was a really, I mean, it still is. It's an elaborate story. And so it was very interesting. It was 600 pages, the original draft that I wrote. So I was like, don't worry, I'll cut it down. And then I did not. I was like, this is not getting cut down. So that's why it's two books rather than one. There was just too much for a single book. But it was, yeah, it was so intricate that I actually, every time I'm like, oh, I don't think I'll need this, I'll take that out. It was in danger of collapsing. And I like, it was kind of a mystery to me too. It wasn't totally finished when I revisited it. It was sort of in pieces. And I could tell that there was something really big I was going for, and I didn't write it down anywhere in any of the like documents that I opened up, and I was looking for it. I was, you know, it was really like, it was like a message in a bottle. It was just all these pages all stuffed in there. And they were, I had no idea what some of them meant. And I still don't, you know, I've sort of had to like reconstruct things backwards. But I was a little impressed by you know, how much of that story I apparently kept in my head as a child and never outlined or wrote down anywhere. But it was a mystery that I had to sort of piece back together. So in a lot of ways, I think that there are like the structure of it is very, it still does follow in broad strokes the plot of the original, and many of the mysteries and many of the you know, the revelations that the characters come through, those are, you know, those are intact, those are from the book. And then there are a few, I think there are a few like, you know, I'm trying to think which chapters have had the least amount of change. I think there's like lines in it where there's like, of course we celebrate Christmas, it's the most important meal of the day. That was something that like I made up with my friends as a kid. Like, you know, it was there are certain things that are in there for my own nostalgia for this thing that like I shared with 8 other people.
Love that.
I am in love with the crew of the Calamari Rose. I absolutely adore every single one of them. Is there one character that you wanted to spend more time with of the crew specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think these characters have also been around for a while. I think that the sort of the named, like there's like, you know, the main characters, there's Zope, there's Jacoby and Pink, or nope, sorry, Jacoby and Fives. And there's Alma and these characters are sort of like, they're the ones that keep popping up again and again, even though they've had personality changes, design changes, name changes. I still sometimes I think some of them I changed their names pretty recently because there's like a secret theme that unites all their names. See if you can figure that one out. But there are these characters that are sort of like, I think especially like Jacobean Fives, they were these characters that I was really into as a kid. They're these terrible divorcees that just can't live without each other, and they just have to follow each other around, making each other miserable, but also they would never ever, they can't possibly be parted. This is the main thing that they love in life, is making each other miserable. So I've always had a soft spot for them. And I think Alma is also I don't know, she's always really fun to write. And I love Zope and Clem, and I love them all. Yeah.
While we're recording this, it's Pride Month, but we're probably releasing this a little bit later than that.
We're going to release it around the time the book comes out.
Great.
Okay.
But while we're recording this, it's Pride Month. So I'm wondering what your proudest project is that you've done so far. It's okay if it's NIMONA. I love that book. I love the book and I love the movie. But I'm just curious what you think your proudest project is.
That's hard. It might be NIMONA. I mean, I think because that was the first big thing for me. So I think that's always going to be really close to my heart. But I feel like when I'm working on something, that's it's the main thing that I think about. Whenever I'm in the middle of a project, I'm I'm just obsessed with it. And it's always in my head, and the characters are always kind of talking to me everywhere I go. So yeah. I'm really proud of SCARLET Morning too. I'm really proud of it right now. This is one of the first interviews that I've done about it, actually. And so getting to talk about it with anyone who's actually read it is a big deal. And I'm really proud of that. I'm just proud that after all this time it's coming out, and that I'm proud I wrote it. It was pretty scary, I think, delving into prose. I definitely have it in my head as sort of an awe towards prose authors, because it is such a it's hard. I'm so impressed with anyone who can do it. So yeah, I'm proud I did it. I'm proud it's coming out, and I'm proud people are going to read it.
Be proud and impressed with yourself.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
For real.
My last thing, just so what is next for the crew of the Calamari Rose? I'm assuming you cannot share the title of the follow-up, but is it in the works?
It is in the works. Yes, it is imminent. And no one has said I can't share the title, so I'll do it anyway. It is going to be called Evening Gray. And yeah, it'll come out just as soon as I get it finished.
Nice.
But it is also I'm in the thick of it now, but it will be, I actually really would like to continue building this world out and adding more books. But right now, this is going to be a duology, where the story set up by the first book will be concluded in this second book.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I was going to say the world feels very expansive. It feels very much like a world that can be lived in, but I do respect that, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I hope,
can't wait.
Yeah, we can't wait. We hope that you'll come back and chat with us about it when
let's
it
do
comes
it.
out.
Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, once again, this was Jessica with Syosset Libraries Turn the Page podcast. My co-host has been
Kay from the Reader Services Department.
And our awesome guest has been
Indy Stevenson, coming at you from Los Angeles.
And we are going to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.